All right, is that better?
Yeah, I mean, I was just giving you shit for no reason. But...
Oh, okay. Well, that works too.
Yeah, I figure this would be
lo-fi episodes to
lo-fi
chill.
episode.
It is episode 289 of You From 202, and we're only in March of 2025, and the vibes have already gone back to 2020 because we are remote on Zencastr once again. Extenuating circumstances have pushed us into the dark age, and we all have to experience the terrible feeling of latency and not knowing who's going to speak next every time we have to speak. So I apologize to the listener for that once and for all, but it's the four of us coming to you the first time in the 2025 season after real matches have been played, a loss to FC Cincinnati away, and a win against Nashville SC at home. Two teams that 5 years ago, I don't know, would have been weird to even be saying those are our first two games of the season. Although, is that timeline totally off? When the hell did
Cincinnati was 2019, so we were used to Cincinnati games when they were banging pots and pans for the first responders. I think Nashville was 21, so this is a kind of like surreal time machine kind of lineup from that perspective. But it's nice to be. It's actually not nice, actually, to be back on the fucking on Zencastr, our great sponsor Zencastr's system here. But it's nice to step out of your comfort zone a little bit sometimes, relive history, all that good stuff.
You know what it actually makes me feel like? It makes me feel like I wish I were just on the energy drink soccer show instead right now.
Wow. Yeah, that's exactly
I could just
what
be doing that.
The vibe is.
Or I think for half of those, I was just on a regular ass phone call. Maybe
I was about to say, like, I feel like I'm in my church clothes doing this, because when I was on that, it was like I was just walking around like doing chores while talking to VMS on my phone. So
I think I had like a nervous breakdown when we were joking about Pol Pot Fernandez joining the club, and like I just hadn't gone outside in 4 weeks. What a time that was. Back into Chris Armas era, when we were just waiting every day to see, is the news going to drop? Is the head of a storied institution who seems so ensconced and like nothing can stick to him, are consequences finally going to catch up to them, and we're just going to pick up our phone one day and it's going to say, this head of this organization is gone. And boy, how times have changed, I'm not experiencing anything like that right now. Will anyone rid us of this torrid manager? But no.
Who was really supposed to be just an assistant to start out, but yeah, who knows? Yeah.
What I don't know, what is Armas at Manchester United going to look like for this scenario if we really extend it forward? Anyway, 2 games into the season, I don't know. I think it's time for a vibe check. Vibe check on the New York Red Bulls. Before we get into the nitty gritty, how's the vibe so far?
Zencaster season.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like, it is what it is. We're at soccer. We're soccering. That's how it feels, basically. I don't know. I can't make any more assessment of how it feels beyond that, really. It just kind of
you don't feel destined for the Shield. You don't feel like this was a completely replenished and retooled team ready to charge to the Shield.
Listen, my standards are to the point where I would like for us to have an invincible season, and since that already kind of flew away in the first match, I just have lost interest a little bit. I
You know,
think that happens to be every season.
check
Every
back in
first
for
loss of the
playoffs.
season, yeah, exactly. Shield's gone.
I would respect Miami and maybe like the league more if Miami came out and said, fuck you guys, we're going to go invincible this year, and like set that as their goal. It would give us a little bit more narrative tension to this season. I can tell you that. I wonder,
Yeah.
I don't know what the closest any team has sort of gotten, but
I mean, I was going to say, I mean, I guess when we set the points record in 18 and in 16, when like we've lost everything for the first month of the season and then almost somehow came back to win the Shield, that was, a semi-invincible run. But
that's true.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, without going, into another whole diagnostic on the league and where it's at. Yeah, it's hard to say like how much or how close Miami would be able to get to that, or any team would be able to get to that. Because I don't know. There's always this discourse of like, oh, MLS just needs to take the training wheels off and just let these teams spend whatever they want and have big teams and small teams. But I think there would definitely be a few teams that would spend a little more. But I think across the majority of the league, it would probably stay roughly the same that it is now. I mean, even now, teams have a ton of leeway with all of these TAM and different DP classifications and U22 things. I mean, it's just like teams are already kind of given a lot of leeway in how to set themselves up now, and the league is still kind of a parity swamp. So, yeah, kind of
That's
hard
true.
to say.
And I think a good example of that was our first game of the year against Cincinnati, where we were introduced to Cincinnati's newest player, Kevin Denke, which apparently has spent quite a bit of money on. And I think it shows. I mean, it's this is a different league, to your point, that like Cincinnati buying this guy. I mean, I guess it was a big move as far as I can tell in terms of the league this year, but it was not the signature move. This is like one of a handful of like double digit incoming transfers that the league has gotten, and it's kind of just sort of a new standard for doing business as far as I can tell on the upper end of the league, to be sure. But,
yeah, I mean, it's kind of I when I was kind of like lining up my predictions a few weeks ago, before the season started, I wasn't quite sure what to make of Cincinnati, because I've respected the hell out of Cincinnati's team the last few years, under Noonan, and the way they have themselves structured. But I think last year, with moving out Brenner and moving out Brandon Vasquez, they lost what a big part of their edge was having several large bell cow strikers kind of at the top of the formation, along with Acosta, just sort of making plays more or less. And with both those strikers I just mentioned moving out, and then the Acosta situation that they was up in the air all preseason, I wasn't sure what to make of Cincinnati. But then seeing Evander and seeing Denke, it seems like Cincinnati might be right up there with Columbus as far as any other team in the league. As far as like, when this team signs a player, they're going to be good. They've been sussed out. It's going to be a player that actually adds a dimension to their game. And with both Denke and Evander, you could really see that. Evander maybe isn't the dribbler that Luciano Acosta was, but just incredible passing vision and just quick little touches that unbalanced the RBNY back line. And then kind of like you were getting into, Brit, Denke, who was kind of the big foreign import for them this offseason, and kind of their replication of the Brenner signing. He kind of went off. He kind of took the game by the scruff of the neck, and made a lot of threatening runs, including one that eventually led to a goal. And it's kind of to go back to a theme that we've had on the show a lot the last few years, where it's kind of with Red Bulls, where especially at striker, so much of the strategy is doing not even low spending, because that's not really what's been happening in New York Red Bulls. It's been a pretty steady amount of spending, but just all on these kind of half measure players, and especially at striker. These kind of half-measured either youth signings or a guy like Dante Van Zer, who's kind of an international tweener for 5-6 million or something like that. Whereas you see these teams like Cincinnati or what have you across MLS going out and targeting a guy who's a proven guy, maybe not like a superstar who would be getting signed by a Champions League or something team or something, but solid, proven, player in a European league who has a track record who you can rely on, and just plugging them into your team. That can be done if you're willing to spend an extra 5-10 million, which it seems like this setup in New York just isn't really quite willing to do anymore, unless something like Forsberg or maybe Werner now just falls into their lap.
Yeah, I feel like, you were kind of gushing over how Denki was playing, and I don't blame you. But it also just kind of feels like that we just don't go for, like, if we had some old past his kind of like prime international player, I'd much rather have like a Wilfred Zaha than Eric Maxime Choupo-Moting, despite the fact that he looks kind of like fine, I guess.
Well, yeah, there's a new profile that it's not unheard of at all for MLS teams to be able to sign, fairly, B-list, if you want to call it that, guys, in their mid to late 20s, in their physical prime, who, cost a little bit, but that's just where MLS is supposed to be now. And it feels like that was sort of the edge, as kind of Brit was framing it up a few minutes ago, between these two teams. Mind you, this was a road game against Cincinnati is established as one of the better teams in the league and certainly the conference. And when you go into a game like that on the road, 1-0 isn't the worst result you could suffer, but at the same time, we should have somewhat higher standards at this club, and like we're kind of saying, that little edge that Denki and Evander brought to Cincinnati's game did seem to be the margin.
Last season, didn't we come away with like a 1-0 win in Cincinnati in the earlier part of the year?
That sounds about right, yeah.
And I think we relied on this is, kind of
I think that was the game where we won second place and the team started posting second place, season, shit like that, and cursed everything. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Sounds about right. Well, I think we relied on something we talked about a lot last season, which is this idea of like kind of hero ball. Like, we needed somebody to really score a goal out of nothing. And I feel like we might have had a couple moments like that where we had some good looks. There was that, like, I don't know, the Choupo-Moting like back heel, like in the 6-yard box, which is a little weird. But it could have been one of those things where it's like, well, if we just pull shit out of nowhere, like maybe we could get a goal back. But I think the bigger difference, or at least what it felt like, and after watching just this first game, was that I think defensively we just didn't look very solid. And I think like we all had some concerns with like how Hack especially was playing on the back line. And I think that was just a bit different when we look at a team from last year, where at least we thought we could lock down defense, but goal scoring was just like anemic. We probably the same goal scoring issue, or at least it felt that way after Cincinnati. But now with the defense, I don't think any of us feel is an upgrade.
Yeah, I mean, especially now having the Nashville game as context too, it seems like after the early moments of the game, the numbers really were, kind of pulled back by Schwartz. There were long stretches of the game where, Choupo-Moting was really far from goal and just getting the ball on an island really far from goal, and just the team was not advancing the lines upfield very far. And I think that was a bit of timidity based on what you were just saying, Sam, where this defense, especially coming off that last preseason result with the 6-0 hung on them, this defense is not really set and confident yet, and who knows how it will take to get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's interesting to see us commit to the three center back lineup so far, and I guess it's bent and not broken totally. We haven't seen a repeat of the kind of reckless or really like high line that we saw in the end of preseason. But Hawk is an interesting uh, signing so far. I feel like the thing that he reminded me of is he looks enormous, and two, it feels like it takes him like a full 3-point turn to change direction,
Yeah.
back in and back out. It feels like the guy at Sunday League who's like low key kind of a baller and used to play when he was younger, but is now like 45, enormous, and like in terms of like height and stature, and has the world's largest knee brace.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Georgie, no. Yeah, I it continues to be a bit puzzling what the strategy was behind replacing Andres Reyes with Alexander Hawk. Alexander Hawk / Tim Parker, who we found out this week was in such high demand that he and RBNY was so active in recruiting him that it was apparently through Ron Waxman making a phone call to the office. But anyway.
I mean, that's one thing where that for me added clarity to the whole situation, actually.
True.
That he really was signed as like the fourth option, which in a way, I mean, you could spin that as reassuring. I think that.
I mean, I think in any situation, if Parker is going to be playing a lot of minutes this year, it was going to be bad. Or it was going to be a bad situation where that ends up happening. But
don't speak too soon; it could happen.
Well, yeah, but I mean, yeah, obviously at this point, Hawk is the incumbent new third center back, so it was essentially Andres Reyes being replaced with Hawk, in which not to get fully back into the the discourse about Reyes and just I don't know how deep we got into this after the final, but just this moronic idea that got peddled around that he must have been sick on purpose or something like that. There was no actual journalism done verifying that he was lying about being sick or that there was any sort of anything deeper than the fact that sometimes, yes, you are ill and can't perform at a high professional soccer level. So without going back into all that, Reyes is a player who, essentially over the course of those playoffs led us to the final, and more broadly over the course of his tenure with the club, displayed himself to be a, not just a, very good, very talented center back, but one that is, somewhat tuned in to how this team plays, with being the guy who is sort of the superhero in the back line, making recovery runs, making, clearing out aerial balls that, this team has to with a high line. Replacing a player of that profile and those dimensions with a guy like Hawk, who, as we're saying, is so seemingly deficient in those areas, was going to be a gamble in any respect. And it seems like the somewhat literal tactical gamble on the field is still being calculated right now by Schwartz. So we'll see.
I haven't admittedly watched Tim Parker play in the past kind of 3 years or so at New England or whatever, but I'd have to imagine that he might still be a little bit more mobile than Alexander Hawk is. And just like, I don't know, from a layperson's eye, like, his positioning just does not seem very good for a center back. Maybe he's not used to playing in the back three or something, or maybe he's just like instructed to kind of push up into the midfield in a specific way. But the way that he's there just doesn't cover anybody a lot of times. I feel like we saw a few of those runs back. We had to kind of like sprint towards center, but even then it was like he was a few strides off. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's especially a problem if he doesn't really know the system or, needs time to get used to the tactics, because the whole premise of him being here is that he's a guy who used to play for Schwartz at Mainz, because otherwise he's a completely non-distinct, somewhat, washed player. So if he's, on that context and doesn't even know the playbook, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, although I guess at least they are playing him immediately. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's cold comfort. I mean, that said, it was still only a 1-0 loss, and it was a quality finish from Denke, and kind of like you opened this with. It was this is sort of like a expected or like standard result, all things considered. It's not something to draw the
He's on
alarm about. I mean, if
alarm.
anything,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel a bit of continuity with this game. Like the defense does seem more fragile, like Sam was saying, but like it kind of seems to indicate some continuity with last year. And I mean, it's interesting looking at this lineup in this first game as well and pondering like, oh, is this like our true first team, everyone healthy lineup? And are we going to struggle to get everyone on the field again? Because like we have Forsberg and Choupo-Moting starting. Both of those guys, I think we have to be extremely cautious about or conservative about how many minutes they play. Morgan is joining them up top or joined them up top. He's already picked up an injury. Harper is on the right. He's also injured now. Stroud and Edelman anchored it in the middle. Valencia started on the left. He's a place that's probably the most like iffy as to the question of whether he's like a first team starter. And then the back three of Hawk, Nealis, and Noah Ayla, which I think seems kind of like a first choice back three based off of the squad composition so far. This might be like it in terms of like our first choice 11. And I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, it's a little underwhelming, to be sure.
That midfield feels like a colander, just waiting for things to go through.
I mean, I guess you could say, oh, Carvalho is like a first team player once he's healthy, but I mean, he's still on loan until the summer, right? Like,
Hey, we have Doncor,
yeah,
who we haven't
no,
heard about since last year. So
yeah,
he's
Valencia for his,
he's also injured, right?
I think
He's
so.
one of the injured guys. Yeah.
yeah, Valencia for his part. I mean, I don't know. There were stretches where he like had a nice little sequence of play, but my overall impression from him was that he felt like someone who was playing up a level a little bit, and that over time, I don't know, maybe he grows into it. Maybe there's only one way to kind of step it up, but I don't know. I'm nervous that he might get exposed over time.
Yeah,
But
I don't know.
clearly, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I just don't get. I've only seen him in the. I don't watch Red Bulls too. Sorry, but I've only seen him in these, couple games in the preseason game or whatever. It's strange to me that he's a fullback. It doesn't seem like his game, his body type really like lends itself to that. Like he's kind of just like awkward, and it's certainly not Hawk level, but has like sort of a weird kind of stiff turn to him, and I don't know, kind of just generally kind of stiff on or around the ball, and I don't know, maybe it's a thing where he eventually matures into more of a central defender, but more immediately, like you were saying, Britt, just a guy who's just trying to hang in there at this level, which hasn't broken completely, obviously, but yeah, we need to see a little more dimension from that position if we're going to have any success this year.
Definitely saw a few dangerous misplaced balls from him.
Yeah, I'm remembering that too. Yeah,
Is Morales one of the signings that we had made over at the end of the right before the season started? Is he supposed to be playing that like left wing back spot more permanently?
I think that would have been the idea, but yeah, it remains unclear whether. I mean, the official report is that he's injured, but then I've seen little nuggets and smoke here and there that supposedly there might be a situation where they don't have an international slot to put him on the roster for. So I don't know.
I'm sorry. I know we talked about this last week, but this team is just so anonymous. Just a bunch of NPCs.
Well, I mean, maybe if we can want to jump into while we are, segue from, this whole little chat into injuries, because maybe it is worth its own little kind of addendum because yes, Morales, the official word is that he's injured and we won't be able to see what he looks like until he recovers from this injury. But he's, in a way, he's really fitting in with club culture right off the bat because literally half the squad is injured right now, and we're not even 2 weeks into the season. We're after 2 months of preseason. Like what is going on?
I feel like it's a real monkey's paw curl moment where, like, oh, we kind of got our business done and people were able to get into the preseason camp, and now they've been able to get into preseason camp, they've injured themselves.
I guess, but I mean, it's kind of a thing where, like, and I said this online a little bit today, because Sofo is one of the players who's injured. My boy Sofo, we finally got him off Sofo Island for the Nashville game, so we'll get to that in a few minutes. But he's now injured after his little moment in the spotlight, and it's kind of a thing I said online about this, where it's like one of the many drawbacks of having your roster strategy built around just constantly buying these half measure lottery tickets on these guys in their teens and early 20s is that you don't know whether these guys can actually handle a season or not. You don't know whether they've proven themselves to be able to stay healthy or not. That's you don't know whether he's going to be a top level player or not. Sure, that's always the gamble with young players, but it's also that you don't know whether he's going to end up being a guy like what have you, countless top exciting young players who have their careers derailed by injury. You just don't know that, and that's another reason why sometimes you have to pay the premium a little bit and go ahead and get a guy who has proven he can actually last through a few pro seasons in a row without constantly being on the injured list.
While we began this topic, I started investigating injuries in soccer, because it feels like the more time goes on and the more advanced our medical methods are, it just feels like guys are picking up knocks more than ever. And I wanted to know if that was true. And lo and behold, I found an NIH paper evaluating MLS injuries. And, lo and behold, between 2014 and 2019, overall injury incidence was found to decline during the course of the study period. But worry not, I'm sure that this paper is going to be purged from the federal website any minute now. Will be destroyed, and all of the little like training bras that they run around with will be replaced by Neuralink implants that give everyone a heart attack.
That's right.
Instead. But I am surprised to read that, and apparently it's 4 times more likely to get injured in a match than during training, which also kind of surprises me. It feels like the Red Bulls in particular,
I was going to say,
always
not the Red Bulls.
Injuries. Granted, this is 6 years old now, to be fair, but maybe it's arguably we're in a whole other era of MLS since 2019, but still sort of mildly surprised by that. But.
Well, and it's not even a thing that you could necessarily pin to Schwartz, because I mean, this was just the story of the club's life all through the Struber years too. That just, guys were constantly injured, or guys would have a star turn in a game, or come on the scene, and establish themselves in the first team, and then 2 days later it was like, blew his ACL training, so that's the end of that. And it's just like, what are they doing in training? Or is this a personnel problem where we're just hiring bunk medical staff? I don't think it's the latter. I think all obviously there's better doctors than others, but I think they're all going from the same textbook with a lot of these injuries. What the hell are we doing in training that's causing guys to be this injured? That's causing guys to be rotated as much as they've had to be the last several years.
They're just doing the Jurgen Klinsmann routine.
Well, I mean, you joke, but I mean, that's,
Well, yeah, I think the attitude might be similar in terms of.
I think the question, like bringing it up as a recruitment question, is also relevant and interesting, because who is one guy who seems to have a nose for just finding durable, reliable reliable, if not spectacular players is Bruce Arena. Like he always has his guys that he gets that will play 30 matches a year for him no matter what.
Right.
And I guess his results have varied in recent years, but like it seems to bear fruit. Just at least knowing that you'll have guys that you can rely on,
Guys that can play.
Yeah, like you can't get positive XG if you're not on the field, And to that question, like so far, Chupo has been able to play both matches for us, and I think he's looked decent these first two matches, I guess, and including this first match against Cincinnati. But watching him, I do just get nervous. I'm like, is this really the guy that like we're expecting to be like a first team workhorse? And maybe really we are expecting to get like 20, 25 games out of Victor Bogash instead, and he's just already hurt. I don't know, but it does make me nervous that we're coming into the season with Chupo and Forsberg as like the two big guys.
Yeah, and I agree with you that Chupo Moten looked like fine, but I also get the sense that he's kind of right now he feels like he's a little above the league and has a little bit of that arrogance and still kind of tries a few little things. But
that one back heel, I mean, I think it might have been a situation in the Cincinnati game. I think it might have been a situation where he just didn't realize how much time he has.
Yeah.
But that's supposed to be a thing that a veteran player does know. So it's a problem that he doesn't know that. It might have something to do with the fact that he took a year off. And then also, but I think, it might have been a situation where he didn't realize how much time he had, but it also might have been a situation where, like, kind of like you're saying, Peaches, he's just kind of like, well, this is just Sunday League for me.
Well,
if it doesn't work out, nobody's going to be pissed. Like,
I think that's a good thing right now, a little bit, to have that mentality a little if you're a striker. But I worry that if he starts getting a goal drought of some sort, that he's just going to totally just lose any kind of semblance of confidence or ability.
This might as well be astrology, what I'm about to say, but like, sometimes I feel like newer signings like that to MLS, they can land and they have a little bit of that magic dust a bit where they feel a little crisper and they feel confident and they feel like they can confidently beat the MLS players just with doing something they're not used to seeing. But then like over time, that element of surprise and freshness sort of like wears off. I think it's gotten a little bit less relevant over the years. I think this was like really apparent in like 2014-ish and less so now. But I think that could happen with Chupo. I will go one further and have a little bit of a hot take and say that I don't really mind the back heel that much. Like I think if he does do a proper turn there, like I think a defender probably gets a foot on it. And the back heel ended up looking kind of stupid, but the bigger issue is that I think it probably would have taken him longer to turn than it should have.
Yeah, well, I mean, this was something I frequently said when Dante Van Zer was still near Red Bull, but I think I immediately reacted when I saw that back, being like, oh, that's something I would have done. And that's not a great sign, I don't think.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Well, I think let's move on to Nashville a little bit to change or to just progress. And we mentioned it before, we're off Sofo Island. Sofo is off. He scored the first goal for the Red Bulls due to some involvement from Chupo, I might add. But what a way to start the season. How was it seeing your guy Sofo bag the first goal of the year in person?
It was pretty funny, actually. I thought when I realized who it was, but also, now our joint top lead scorer is injured, so I don't know how I feel necessarily about all that.
Yeah,
I mean,
this is. Go ahead, Brit.
No, go ahead.
I probably had less to say than you did, so.
I was just gonna say, this is our like 31st or whatever consecutive unique scorer. So I think people have been talking about that. And maybe another hot take. I don't know. Maybe we should run the numbers on this. But to me, this doesn't seem like such a crazy thing that we've had a different we've never had consecutive opening scorers to start the season. Although I guess is it truly like 31 different guys, or is it just that like no one's
They've not been the same person year to year.
Yeah,
I think it might be 31 different guys.
Well, okay, I guess that's a little bit more rare then. I'll give some credit to that, but I mean, I would like to look at the list. I mean, there's probably some all-timers on there. I guess Kyle Duncan was last year's. That's not so fun, but I hope is Carlos Rivas one of them? I hope so.
I'm on the Metro Fanatic thing, and it looks like there might not be any repeats. That's pretty cool.
Are there any big names? Some older Red Bulls fans.
I mean, obviously Savarese, Jim Rooney.
That's not even the other
other Rooney brother.
This was Jim Rooney. Was from the Bronx.
Josie Altidore. I mean, it's all the guys. BWP, everyone else. Ben Mines.
Yeah, there you go. That's when you got that jersey.
That's when I got that jersey.
Andreas Ivan.
Yeah. Honestly, the later guys are more up to speed. The other guys I kind of knew.
Yeah, the older guys are kind of like classics. They're a little bit too established. Spindola, I guess, is a character of sorts and a villain, but not quite Ivan style. I guess it was more that Kyle Duncan, I think, is the only remaining player who could repeat. Well, congratulations, Sofo. You've entered truly the ranks of the immortal. Maybe that'll be a new sort of row or honor or hall that we can inaugurate with a 30-minute winding ceremony and a different plaque to put up at the arena. How was it to be at a Sports Illustrated stadium?
I'm sorry. I'm so distracted thinking about Andreas Ivan and how he was a part of this team.
I wish I could have had an automated camera take a photo of Andreas Ivan at all times. I guess that's just them recording the match. But I wish I could get like a surveillance camera that's following Andreas Ivan and capturing random moments like you can now get at Sports Illustrated Stadium, just like you're at Thunder Mountain or whatever.
Yeah, Jesus.
But even lower res than Thunder
Mountain. It's definitely Sports Illustrated Stadium. There's definitely not a single inch of real estate in the stadium that it does not have Sports Illustrated slapped all over it. I don't know how much of this is just like the sort of uncanny effect of the fact that, you know, it was both Red Bull Arena and the name of the team is the Red Bulls, but seeing Red Bull stuff slapped all over the stadium just made sense and didn't feel invasive. Now that all that inventory has been taken over by SI logos, it's very strange and very in my face.
I don't think Red Bull even used all of that space. It's just like they put up like basically every Sports Illustrated soccer cover.
I wasn't even necessarily getting to that first. I was just meaning like just the general like proscenium of the stadium and the field, just like every single like piece
aspect of it has been branded
that isn't covered by a person's ass has like, you know, Sports Illustrated.
That's actually really funny that like that the complete elision of the two things, like the complete conflation of like the brand and the team name has like made them completely forget that they're like separate and that like other teams do just have their logo in their stadium, and they probably just walked around the stadium. And they're like, oh yeah, there's the Red Bull logo. Replace it with the new logo. Like,
right.
It completely went over their heads that like, oh yeah, there are places where it can still just say Red Bull on it. The arena, I guess. But
is Red Bull even a sponsor of the New York Red Bulls? Like they are of Inter Miami.
Yeah, because apparently it did just come out today. We're recording on Thursday. That Red Bull's now the official energy drink partner of Inter Miami. Was this what Jurgen Klopp was brought in to negotiate for? It's just like is Inter Miami going to end up on the cover of Red Bull magazine before Emil Forsberg? Like what's going on here?
I'm actually shocked that Miami didn't already have an energy drink sponsor where when you drink it, you turn into evangelical DJ.
Yeah, exactly. It's not messy Moss energy drink, but yeah, and then there's that weird element of it. I mean, just that was a lot, and I'm sure that was just mixed in with just the general kind of shock of it. Now saying Sports Illustrated Stadium on the outside of the building for the first time in 15 years, but also
On the gate remains, right?
Good question.
No, they've switched to Toyota for a couple of years now.
Oh, okay.
God, no, nothing gold can stay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, also,
I'm sure deep down in the bowels of the stadium somewhere, there's like some like employee bathroom or something that still has like a framed Yanmar ad over the urinal. But who knows?
well, I mean, this is, I guess, related to this topic of change, but also no more Ruiz being Kitman at RBNY.
Yeah, that was a bit strange. Sean Ruiz, obviously the son of Fernando Ruiz, the longtime equipment manager team. He's apparently announcing 3 weeks into the season that he's out. I mean, honestly, it's without getting too wistful and overly serious about the status of a equipment manager. Is the Ruizes were like a very real link to the past and just a general conduit for this club's history, and it's kind of intangible thing that's sort of important to something like a sports team. And losing that does not exactly reassure me as the continued takeover of parachuting Austrians and Germans continues.
Yeah, that's very much one of those I would consider intangibles that really affect how a team's morale goes. Is stuff like, or guys like that.
And just having somebody in the room who has known the level and knows what the expectations and standards are and when they might be higher or lower than usual, and then knows when to blow the whistle on things and stuff like that. Even if it's just an equipment manager, those sorts of personalities are important, and I feel like that's just another aspect of that this team's losing in the last few years.
But yeah, everyone go send Ruiz some love.
This is also the week that there was the farewell ceremony for Ryan Mara, which also fits that description.
That happened during halftime.
Yeah, tell me about that. How did that go?
It was cold, and they picked a very interesting group of people to honor him, I guess.
A very interesting way of presenting them, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, who they got? Mike Grella, they got Luis Robles, and they got Marc de Grandpré, I guess, to give him some custom goalie gloves that they all...
Connor Lade had the goalie gloves.
But, Connor Lade, but they all...
I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
That seems like a pretty expected group of people.
Yeah. No, I know it's an expected group of people, but it's like the weird thing was that they all had pre-recorded like vocal things that they all...
Yeah, that was the weird part.
That they played on the speakers, and they like had the camera on the person, like as they were speaking through the recorded segment. But
yeah, they just had them just standing there silence while their disembodied voice was played over the PA system. It was very strange.
It was like as though
they were reminding me of like the Tim and Eric thing where they like record the dog saying like, "Hey," like the kid's dog who died. Like, it's your dog.
Yes, it's exactly what it was like. It was like watching somebody's inner monologue in a fucking sitcom or something.
Yeah,
so,
and it was like
whatever person planning the ceremony who just really wanted to show off the PA system, I guess he succeeded there.
And it wasn't very cinematic, I don't think, as they maybe intended it to be. And I think they kind of like like kept handing off this one pair of gloves that they created inside of the case, and it was just kind of awkward. Also, like having Luis Robles do his whole like speech thing for a guy who he kept out of the starting lineup for years and years, like to an unprecedented extent, was pretty funny, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of, I mean, whatever ceremony they ended up doing, it was going to be kind of a hard note to strike because it's just such an unusual situation for a player to end up in the status that Mero was in, where, he, is around and is a visible part of the club for a very long time. And that's a very real thing to pay tribute to. But it's also just like, guy played what, like 15, 20 games over the course of a decade or so. It's not like he actually, altered or impacted the direction of the club, really. So kind of a hard needle to thread as far as like how you pay tribute to him and what you talk about and frame in that kind of a ceremony. It's not like I was expecting much from this club the way it's been handling that kind of stuff the last few years.
Yeah.
So couple of goalie gloves and like a a framed photo or framed painting from sporting goods store. I mean, that's it's about what I would have expected. And I mean, it's not like I don't think Ryan Mara is a super sentimental or kind of ceremonious kind of guy. So or pretentious kind of guys. So I'm sure he and his family were very appreciative of it. Whatever it was, and we're just glad to get one last moment on the field. But in the meantime, I think on top of Sean Ruiz, I think even more so in in the locker room and in the actual training sessions, all that kind of stuff. I think Ryan Mara was another kind of just continuous thread from better times and the ups and downs of the club over the last decade or so. Where losing that is going to be certainly an adjustment that can be kind of hard to make. And then losing that sort of character in your setup and in your locker room can lead to some unknowns. So we'll see.
The club didn't do themselves any favors either by, frankly, doing too much with some other lesser players who like made their return to Red Bull Arena, like having a whole plaque ordeal for Drew Yearwood, a player who I liked, was strange because he was a player for like 2-3 seasons at a kind of ho-hum period of the club. And that kind of ceremony, that kind of amount of time was like maybe wouldn't have been an unusual thing to do for Mara a little bit, but now they've like worked themselves into a situation where you got to do more than that, but also you don't want to spotlight his sort of interesting position too much in an unflattering way. So sort of a problem of their own design a bit. And then I heard, so as the listener can probably discern by now, I did not make it out to this match, but like I heard that they still had the kids like playing on the field while they were doing this.
Like off in the other corner.
It's like, why would it kill them to not do that once? Like it's not like, I mean, maybe this is a revenue thing for them.
I was gonna say they got to hit those group ticket numbers.
They do promote it, like have your team play on the Field of Dreams on the PA system. So
I never considered that like you would have to pay to do that. I always kind of thought it was like
it's local teams around.
That's the whole thing. It's just like getting teams and clubs to bring teams out for a party, and then they have tickets and then a moment on the field. So
Well, I hope you guys look forward to when this team finally puts in the right ceremony and thanks Gonzalo Verón for his time at the club.
I mean, he deserved one more than Von Zer's week of revelry.
That's true. I don't know. I mean, it's funny. It's hard to imagine like a tonally appropriate ceremony for the Red Bulls. Like we've talked about this before, but
this is the club that retired BWP's number while he was still playing.
Yeah. And when we still had some history, going on, but it is worth repeating that the club has developed this weird tick where it behaves as though it's an expansion club that was like founded in 2011 or 2021 or something like that. It's for no real reason. And like this Ryan Mara thing also is like kind of feels like that. Kind of feels like everyone just like inherited this ceremony they had to put together and had no intuitive feel for how to properly execute it. And then I am, just the last thing on the Sports Illustrated Stadium thing, I was amused by several of the photos of the Sports Illustrated covers pasted on the walls. It does remind me of these terrible ex-urban high schools and middle schools I would have to go to for debate tournaments on the weekends, where they would just have these like big fat heads of like whatever random B-list Olympian like got a bronze medal that year, pasted on the wall with no other information, maybe some like inspirational message next to it. Clearly just some poor teacher was asked to do this like with no other time to think. And by God, Sports Illustrated Stadium has reproduced that feeling incredibly. And I think in general it just is really acing the feeling that we've talked about of like a mid-major sort of college, where it's like if anyone within 300 miles wants to get a sense of Major League sports, this is the closest they're going to get. It just feels like a sports experience curated for people who have no other option to find like the real deal, and like a Potemkin village or something. You would never guess that we're in the New York metropolitan area. So in that sense, it's sort of a fascinating object to keep on regarding. And it really keeps on delivering every week. So kudos to the team for that.
It looks like they really splurged on the cardboard or whatever that they put these things up, the particle board or whatever. But I don't know. I mean, I guess they bought the rights, so they have the right to kind of gussy up the stadium however they want. But I think Janelle sort of put it well online, saying or kind of honed in on a more specific issue with it too, where you're going to decide to decorate it with Sports Illustrated history and Sports Illustrated covers. Fine, that makes a little bit of sense if they bought the naming rights, but why not have it's not like there haven't been Sports Illustrated covers connected to MLS or even the New York Red Bulls. And sure enough, there's no Clint Mathis cover in the stadium. There's no, I guess there were a couple of Women's World Cup, championship things, but that's kind of in the canon of just general, generic sports stories that Sports Illustrated covers. Just, kind of like Brit was saying, just seems like the sort of thing that was just put on one person's plate with very little thought or resources put into it, and it just looks very tone deaf and poorly measured and just in poor taste, just like every other kind of small thing with this club in the last few years.
Right. It's totally off brand too. If they wanted to be realistic about what they're doing, maybe it should have been highlights for Children's Stadium or something. It could have gotten all the
Highlights has too much of a
prestige for this club.
Yeah, Highlights has
too clear of an identity.
Actually, I need to look and see if they've refinement cultured Highlights magazine. They probably have. Probably massacred.
When will they make a Highlights for adults?
That's Time magazine.
Well, and while we're on the subject of things that things about the Sports Illustrated. Sorry, I'm kind of misquoting it. They're also making a big strive to make clear that it's Sports Illustrated Tickets Stadium, and that the ticketing is a big part of it.
I didn't even think that the magazine was part of it anymore.
Yeah, I mean that's another thing where it's just completely, I don't think anybody really put in any thought into how balanced that should be. And then the other aspect of it that was just very very strange in a very kind of like cheap and low tech sort of way for what's supposed to be like this cutting edge new era. We've seen the debut of these, supposedly what they described in the press release a few months ago about the rights deal as supposedly the NFTs of your experience at the game. And it's just like Brit said, it's like, going down, it's literally just the picture they take of you when you go down Magic Mountain or something. It's just these strange, awkward, just automated camera shots of people just completely poorly positioned, and it's clearly not a professional photo, but it's done with that little photoshopping of like that it's a Sports Illustrated cover. And it's like, I'm sorry, how is anybody over the age of 8 supposed to be like thrilled by this? I mean,
well, you're gonna feel stupid when the Treasury buys 80,000 of these things.
Yeah.
The value is gonna be so great.
Yeah, like what about this as an NFT? Like it looks like it's just, again, like Magic Mountain photos. So
I don't know.
Again, it's just another situation where it's just like I just can't help but just shrug at what this club expects me to think is like
And
cool and new and innovative.
Since you mentioned it, anyone over 8 being unimpressed, it's actually kind of troubling to me that somebody under 8 would be impressed by this, because sorry to be a little bit of all out, little try hard take here, but it kind of does desensitize children to the idea that a camera is always watching you. I mean, obviously we're kind of past the Rubicon there. I'm not naive to that, but it kind of does have a yucky feeling in that sort of way too, that I don't enjoy, at least not in a place that's supposed to be a bit of a escape from your daily life.
Next Red Bull Arena redesign will be in the shape of a panopticon.
Yeah,
right.
We're just gonna have Jeremy Bentham fully embalmed in the stadium. There's probably some League 2 club that actually has Jeremy Bentham in the club shop or something.
Yeah.
I have good news and I have bad news about Highlights Magazine. The good news is that it still exists, seems to be doing well. And the aesthetic for the main magazine, it's been modernized, but it's still whimsical and childlike. The bad news is that there is a Highlights Coco Melon for children, specifically 1 through 4. And they are all being programmed, presumably, to kill the Prime Minister of Malaysia.
Is there Highlights Magazine cryptocurrency yet? Is that one of the cryptos being pumped by
Highlight
our
dollar sign
right now? Yeah.
The crypto for kids.
Stay tuned. It's never too early, folks.
I have one more thing to say, I guess, if we want to talk about kind of the game at some point.
Yeah, let's move on. Go for it.
So, the conditions of the game where it was I have never been, I don't think, in Red Bull Arena in such windy conditions, to the point where I think everyone underdressed for how it felt that day. So I just have one take about this, that if they're doing all of the play calling remotely, there's no way these guys would have had the respect of how much wind was blowing around or how the stadium felt in that moment based on what a weather forecast might say.
You're talking about Apple recording remotely.
Yes, I'm talking about Apple recording all of their play-by-play remotely now. And so I think I don't know
if it's all their play-by-play. Did we even know who was calling the game the other night? Because obviously we were in the stadium, but
was it Marisa doing?
I think for New York games, it might make a little more sense that they actually do it.
Yeah, but if it, I didn't hear the play calling of this yet, but it was just to me.
But I get what you're saying, that in a hypothetical
for the Forsberg
situation,
goal specifically, it's I'm much less maybe necessarily impressed by the technical quality of the Forsberg goal in those conditions, and more I respect that he took the conditions into effect to just put a ball out there, that kind of.
Okay. Correct me from being there in person. I was not there in person, but from the TV perspective, it looked like a pretty classic curler, and it looked like the curl was what you usually see on a ball hit like that. It didn't look like it had a huge swerve.
But I think there's like a very like the wind could have taken it a little bit further to the corner, especially with the way that it was blowing, and I think that like gives a little bit more to how the keeper wouldn't have been able to save something like that. But also like in general, like I think putting shots in when the wind favors you is also like a good strategy. So like I don't necessarily like think that's a bad thing to have happened. I think it's just like a different perspective of play calling that is being missed at a certain level.
Yeah, I think your first point about the broadcast is a little more cogent, and that is something that you're going to lose when you don't have the production capacity, as Apple apparently doesn't anymore, to actually have people in person for games. But yeah, I don't think it's enough to take away from the goal. I mean, I think you got to
No.
even if he did use the wind. I mean, you still have to kick the ball in the right way.
Like yeah, and I'm still giving him credit for that. I just think it's like a different angle on that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think more broadly, speaking about the game, I thought you were going to kind of introduce the game from a tactical sense. This was a game where obviously a pretty clean 2-0 win, kind of the mirror of what happened in Cincinnati, where Cincinnati losing 1-0 to one of the best teams in the league on the road is what's supposed to happen. Well, for here, Nashville at home. In your season opener with a little bit of wind behind you, a 2-0 win is what is supposed to happen. Nashville did not look very good. I'm not entirely sure what kind of shakeups they did to their roster immediately this offseason. They dropped Sean Davis, apparently. They dropped Drew Yearwood. They brought in a few new kind of marginal guys. Including this little like trolley looking blonde like Norwegian guy who was just completely useless in midfield every time he got on the ball. But anyway, not a very impressive team. It seemed like Hani Mukhtar has lost a little bit of his burst and couldn't really do a lot on his own anyway. That guy Surridge, their target striker, was just very pedestrian. Not Nashville did not seem like a great litmus test for where this team is at. Tactically and technically, it seemed like Nashville was not much of a test. But at the same time, you can only play who's in front of you. And like I said, a 2-0 win over a team that Nashville proved themselves to be is about what you would expect. So we're still pretty much at kind of sea level to start out the first couple of weeks with this team. I think should be the most fair assessment.
I think the 2-0 is even an underperformance based on that game, to be honest. Like, we should have scored maybe a couple more.
You think so? I think the whole second half, Nashville was basically us sitting back and absorbing Nashville's pressure, which didn't end up being that threatening in the.
Well, I think there were more chances in the first half, if anything, that we could.
Well, certainly, but I don't know that this was I don't know if you could really describe this as a full out classing that would require the team to score 3 or 4 goals. I think 2-0 was about the most fair and expected result you could get.
I think it's one of those games where if there was a little bit more rhythm, it could have like ballooned or snowballed into that kind of game. Or that's how it felt to me in the first half, at least. And then
Nashville's a team that sits back. I mean, Nashville's a team that doesn't really play to the way we want teams to come out and take risks. And even when Nashville was coming out and trying to attack and send numbers forward a little bit in the second half, we didn't really capitalize on that on the back end.
Honestly, I felt, if anything, we looked worse when Nashville were kind of putting guys out there in terms of how we were like moving the ball.
Right. I mean, to my point that I don't think it was. I think 2-0 was like a very fair and accurate scoreline for the way the game played out.
So I think, Peaches, you were asking who the commentators were for the game, right? For the match analysis. I think it was Kalen Carr, and then the guy whose name escapes me, but we all know as the guy with the British accent who doesn't seem to like not yell all the time.
I don't know.
Just like the one who's like incredibly annoying, like he's just like always like he's like over dramatizes like
Yeah.
every single comment about the game. So they were there. They were the ones commentating. I mean, one of the things that they'd mentioned, I think, is that like the Nashville like coach pretty openly was like either called the team like, you know, this Nashville like 2.0, or like a rebuild season or something. So seems like they're just kind of like trying to like reconnect the dots a little bit. And it felt apparent during the game. I didn't think they looked particularly good. We even when we gave them possession, like a lot of their plays just like just kind of dissolved in our midfield, which, as we've said before, thought the best thing in the world. So I don't know. Part of me comes away from the game thinking that like, you know, not the best team. I don't think Nashville is going to really do very well this year based off of just that performance, but who knows? But I think, you know, we probably, I don't know. I thought we could have came away with maybe more than two. Peaches, I'm inclined to agree with you there.
Well, give it to me straight, actually, though. What's the deal with Sofo?
I mean, that was a good follow up on his goal. I mean, he was aggressive kind of all game. Honestly,
Well, I mean,
looked better than expected.
well, I mean, to harken back to a couple points I've made on the show over the last year or so. First off, with just, you know, as we posted online, you know, as I was saying, after his little cameo near the end of last season, looked like a pretty lively, active, effective player. I don't get why this is one of the guys who's, you know, having to wait around on the USL team, or sorry, the MLS Next Pro team, and not have an actual contract and not be, you know, hyped up or anything, because he looked a lot more effective on the field in that game last year than, like, you know, fucking Julian Hall or, you know, these teenagers that get arbitrarily shoehorned into. So, and then, you know, that's kind of a parallel too with Doncor, where it's just like Doncor is another guy where, like, there was no hype around him being added to the roster or anything. He's just kind of this, unhyped, you know, anonymous guy with RB2, and then he gets plugged onto the field and looks very, very quality, where it's just like, you know, I don't get why we have all this fanfare and ink wasted on Julian Hall and Aiden Stokes and, like, you know, all these, you know, Raul Mitchell and these guys who are just clearly not ready for prime time. And then you have these foreign players coming in and just, you know, with nobody commenting, just immediately look up to the pace. So that's strange to me. And I don't get why Sofo wasn't given more opportunities after that cameo at the end of last year. But then, again, to speak to another point that I've made on the podcast recently, during the preseason episode, talking about the way kind of the front part of the formation was set up, where it was basically going to be Choupo-Moting sort of playing as a false nine or like a false target man, sort of setting up deep and playing with his back to goal, linking up play and trying to spring Morgan and Forsberg on the side of him. And I was, you know, a little worried that Morgan and Forsberg don't really have that, you know, engine to really make much of those opportunities. Sofo, on the other hand, being, you know, very quick and sharp, little incisive forward, it's kind of the ideal player you want for that sort of approach and setup. So, you know, it seems like it was basically an accident that he was playing at all, both these situations, which I think just says more about, you know, this club than it does about Sofo himself. But, you know, looks like he's injured already, but maybe we'll see, you know, more of him as the months go on, hopefully.
Yeah, and beyond the little engine thing, it's just like I really liked his off-ball movement and kind of that aggression. Like, I don't think I've really seen that from other players we've had, at least that successfully. The way that he covers ground is actually pretty impressive, I thought.
Well, the next couple matches we have are going to be at Atlanta away and home to Orlando to see how this injured squad and these new guys might slot in. It's also crazy, like, thinking back just a decade ago, that, you know, we're opening this season playing, I'll say it, 4 Southern teams in a row. I'll count Cincinnati as Southern. How the times change.
Yeah.
It just feels like all of our games are in SEC country now. But we got 2 Saturdays, got a whole week in between. Cam Harper, I guess, is hurt. Unclear for how long. Lewis Morgan is hurt with a different injury. Apparently, it's not his back injury or his hip injury that he had before. I mean, I think it's fair to say that like this injury bug kind of is just the remaining concern about this team. Like 3 points from 2 games, pretty standard, pretty kind of like what you would expect from this season. But so far, I am not reassured that we won't repeat something as like last year, where we started pretty well and then kind of just petered out as guys lost fitness and we lost sort of a sense of purpose to the season. But maybe I'm being too pessimistic. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I said in the beginning of the episode, I'm kind of like, soccer is happening about this season. So let's kick some balls. Is pretty much it.
That's one way of looking at it. Yeah, I mean, I think Atlanta. I mean, it's obviously early in the season, and every sample size is going to be extremely small. Atlanta, what have their results been so far? I mean, they had a super flashy offseason, but they always have a super flashy offseason. It doesn't really seem to have any correlation with how.
I was going to say earlier in the episode that we should have signed Miguel Almiron.
Maybe 5 years ago, but I don't know how much of a return that's supposed to be in 2025. But it looks like this guy Latte Loth, who is despite for some reason the MLS record signing or record import signing, despite being just like a random guy at Middlesbrough in the championship. But anyway, he's opened his account a little bit. It looks like they've this is supposed to be like, the Garth Lager way, Sounders South, like, big, serious, sensible Atlanta team. But, I'll believe it when I see it. Is there anything like, we ended that thing, I guess it's going to be in Atlanta, right? So it doesn't matter that streak of like, Atlanta's never beaten us at home or something. But
they've never beaten us in the league.
Is that's one in the league?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
and that's still intact, right?
No, I think we lost to them finally last year.
Okay.
Is my memory. Because, for the longest time, the only time we had ever lost to them was that one playoff game. The one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, last October we lost 2-1, and I think that was... Oh, in April... Yeah, we lost both games. We lost in April of 2023, too.
Okay. All right, so yeah, there's not even that, and and like we were kind of saying in pre-production here, it was just sort of like, it feels a little strange for this matchup to come this early in the season, but then also it has not been a relevant rivalry for several years now. So I guess it is, like Brit was saying, just another just Southern expansion team for us to cycle through, just another. Just kind of fodder of the league in the 2020s.
All right. Well, I guess we'll see if the game is going to answer our questions. Are you looking for any big performances? Maybe a star return from Sofo, a star return from Lewis Morgan? Who knows?
Well, I would say I would like to see, some looks at some of these guys like Bogach and Morales and some of that, but it doesn't look like that's happening anytime soon. So I don't really know what questions I want answered for me in this game, other than is this again, does the game answer your questions? Would a win convince me? Would a win in Atlanta convince me of this Red Bulls team? I don't know, probably not, because Atlanta is just kind of a weird little Rorschach test still. Would a huge loss in Atlanta, alarm me? Probably not. I mean, it's still early in the season. So, where I think, even by MLS standards, we're a ways away from having the game answer our questions too much.
I think that's a good way to put it. Any other thoughts before we sign off?
Now let's go
All
kick
right.
them balls.
Kick the balls.